What if I told you that every time you take a breath, ancient DNA from extinct humans is controlling how your lungs work? That when you get sick, genes from people who died 40,000 years ago are fighting the infection? That your ability to fall in love, handle stress, even the shape of your nose, is being influenced by relatives you never knew existed? This sounds impossible, but it's happening right now inside your body as you watch this video. Somewhere deep inside your cells lies a time capsule, a collection of ancient genetic fragments from human relatives who vanished tens of thousands of years ago. Neanderthals, Denisovans, they're gone, but their DNA is still shaping the way you breathe, heal, sleep, even how you fall in love. Right now, prehistoric genes are controlling how your immune system fights off infections. They're determining whether you'll get a blood clot, how well you handle altitude, and even how your brain processes emotions. If you sneeze every spring, thank your Neanderthal ancestors. If you can climb mountains without gasping for air, you might have Denisovan genes to thank. This isn't science fiction, it's science fact, and the discoveries coming out of laboratories around the world are more mind-blowing than any movie script. In 2025, scientists finally gave a face to the mysterious Denisovans by extracting DNA from 85-year-old dental plaque hidden in a well. They've proven that a single ancient gene is the reason Tibetans can survive on the roof of the world. They've discovered that half of the Neanderthal genome still lives on, scattered across 7 billion modern humans in tiny fragments. Every one of us carries between 1 and 5% ancient DNA. That might not sound like much, but consider this. Even though only 100,000 Neanderthals ever lived, their genetic legacy is so powerful that it's still shaping human evolution today. You are, quite literally, a walking museum of prehistoric humanity. The most fascinating part? We're only just beginning to understand how profound this influence really is. Scientists are discovering that ancient DNA doesn't just affect our biology, it might be changing how we think, behave, and experience the world. Today, we're going to explore 6 incredible stories scientists have uncovered, revealing how prehistoric DNA still influences your everyday life in ways you never imagined. Because about 60,000 years ago, something extraordinary happened that would change human history forever. About 60,000 years ago, our species, Homo sapiens, began the great journey out of Africa. Picture this: small bands of early humans, perhaps no more than a few thousand individuals, stepping into uncharted territory. They carried with them nothing but stone tools, fire, and an incredible capacity for adaptation. What they didn't know was that they were about to participate in the most consequential genetic mixing event in human history. But we weren't alone. In the frost-covered landscapes of Europe, Neanderthals had already been thriving for over 200,000 years. They were master toolmakers, skilled hunters who had survived multiple ice ages. Their bodies were built like living fortresses, stocky, muscular, perfectly adapted to the brutal cold. Meanwhile, across the vast steppes and mountains of Asia, another group had made their home, the Denisovans. These mysterious people had conquered some of the most challenging environments on Earth. From the thin air of the Tibetan Plateau to the dense forests of Southeast Asia. When these 3 human groups encountered each other, something unprecedented happened. We didn't just exchange glances, we exchanged genes. Think about what this means. Imagine meeting someone so genetically different from you that their DNA could fundamentally alter your descendants' ability to survive in new environments. That's exactly what happened when our African ancestors met these cold-adapted, mountain-dwelling relatives. Fossil evidence from the Czech Republic and Germany, combined with ancient DNA sequencing, confirms interbreeding began as early as 45,000 years ago. But this wasn't just occasional mixing. It was systematic, repeated, and transformative. In caves across Europe and Asia, archaeologists have found evidence of these encounters, shared tools, similar burial practices, and most remarkably, the bones of hybrid children. The most famous is a teenage girl discovered in Siberia's Denisova cave. Her mother was Neanderthal, her father was Denisovan. Scientists nicknamed her Denny, and her very existence proves that these weren't hostile encounters between competing species. They were meetings between closely related peoples who recognized each other as family. These encounters created a genetic network, a prehistoric social media, where survival skills were passed not in posts, but in DNA. When a Neanderthal who had evolved cold resistance genes for 200,000 years had children with a modern human, those children inherited genetic advantages that had taken millennia to develop. It was like receiving a software update that instantly improved your body's operating system. The numbers are staggering. Scientists estimate that in some regions up to 10% of the population consisted of hybrid individuals. Genetic analysis reveals that modern humans and Neanderthals interbred at least 3 separate times. Each encounter left its mark on our genome, creating a patchwork of ancient adaptations that we carry to this day. But here's what makes this story even more incredible. The mixing wasn't random. Natural selection acted like a quality control system, keeping the beneficial genes and gradually eliminating the harmful ones. Genes that help fight European diseases? Kept. Genes that improve fat storage for surviving harsh winters? Kept. Genes that might have caused developmental problems? Gradually removed from the population. This selective process created something unprecedented in human evolution, a species that carried the accumulated survival wisdom of multiple human lineages. We became living libraries of genetic adaptation, carrying solutions to environmental challenges that our ancestors had spent hundreds of thousands of years perfecting. The evidence is written in our DNA like chapters in a history book. Every modern human of non-African descent carries between 1 and 4% Neanderthal DNA. People from Papua New Guinea and other Melanesian islands carry up to 5% Denisovan DNA. These percentages might seem small, but they represent thousands of genetic variants that influence everything from our immune responses to our physical appearance. What's truly remarkable is that this ancient mixing event set the stage for humanity's incredible adaptability. The genetic diversity we inherited from our extinct relatives may be one of the key reasons our species was able to colonize every continent, survive climate changes, and develop the complex societies we see today. But the real surprises were yet to come. As our ancestors spread across the globe, carrying their mixed heritage, these ancient genes would prove their worth in ways nobody could have predicted, and sometimes they would create problems that we're still dealing with today. Take Sarah, a 32-year-old teacher from London. Every spring, she suffers from severe hay fever that makes her life miserable. What Sarah doesn't know is that the genes causing her allergic reactions are a 40,000-year-old gift from her Neanderthal ancestors, a gift that once saved lives, but now makes her sneeze uncontrollably every time the pollen count rises. Sarah's story is just one example of how Neanderthal DNA became both our biological shield and our genetic burden. Meet Sarah from our previous story. She's standing in her London apartment, windows sealed shut, air purifier humming in the corner, tissues scattered across her coffee table. Outside, spring has arrived in all its glory, trees blooming, flowers opening, pollen dancing in the sunlight. For most people, it's beautiful. For Sarah, it's biological warfare. What Sarah doesn't realize is that her misery is a direct result of a genetic gift that saved her ancestors' lives 40,000 years ago. Every sneeze, every watery eye, every congested breath is her Neanderthal heritage in action. Neanderthal DNA gave us powerful tools to survive harsh environments. When our African ancestors first stepped into the frozen landscapes of Europe and Asia, they were walking into a death trap. New diseases, brutal cold, unfamiliar parasites. Everything about these environments was designed to kill them. But the Neanderthals had been there for 200,000 years. They had developed the biological equivalent of a Swiss Army knife, genes that could handle whatever Europe threw at them. Some of their immune system genes helped fight off Eurasian diseases that would have decimated African populations. Imagine encountering a pathogen your immune system has never seen before. It's like trying to fight an enemy you can't recognize. But when our ancestors interbred with Neanderthals, they gained access to an immune system that had been battle-tested against European diseases for millennia. The results were dramatic. The studies of ancient DNA show that within just a few thousand years of entering Europe, modern humans had acquired Neanderthal genes that made up a significant portion of their immune system toolkit. Genes that controlled the production of immune signaling molecules, genes that help recognize dangerous pathogens, genes that regulated inflammatory responses, all gifts from our extinct cousins. But the immune system wasn't the only upgrade. Others improved fat storage to endure cold winters. Neanderthals had mastered the art of surviving in subarctic conditions. Their bodies were biological furnaces, capable of generating and retaining heat in ways that would have impressed any engineer. When modern humans inherited these genes, they gained the ability to survive in climates that would have killed their purely African ancestors. Archaeological evidence supports this genetic story. Sites across Europe show that within a few thousand years of modern humans arriving, they were thriving in environments that had previously been Neanderthal-only territory. They were hunting mammoth in the frozen tundra, surviving ice ages, and spreading into regions that required sophisticated cold weather adaptations. But here's where the story takes a fascinating twist. This ancient gift was double-edged. Some Neanderthal genes make modern humans more prone to allergies, depression, even nicotine addiction. Let's return to Sarah's allergies. Her immune system carries Neanderthal genes that were designed to be hypervigilant against parasites and pathogens. In Ice Age Europe, this hypervigilance was a matter of life and death. An immune system that reacted quickly and strongly to foreign substances could mean the difference between surviving a deadly infection and becoming another casualty of the harsh environment. But in modern London, Sarah's Neanderthal immune system can't tell the difference between a dangerous parasite and harmless tree pollen. So it launches the same aggressive response that once protected her ancestors from deadly infections. Her runny nose, watery eyes, and sneezing fits are her immune system's way of trying to flush out what it perceives as a dangerous invader. The irony is profound. The very genes that allowed her ancestors to survive and thrive in prehistoric Europe are now making her miserable in the modern world. And allergies are just the beginning. Research has revealed that Neanderthal DNA influences a startling array of modern health conditions. Some Neanderthal genes increase the risk of depression, particularly seasonal affective disorder. This makes evolutionary sense. Neanderthals lived through long, dark European winters, and genes that help them cope with limited sunlight would have been valuable. But in modern humans living in artificially lit environments, these same genes can contribute to mood disorders. Even more surprising, that Neanderthal DNA affects addiction susceptibility. Studies have found that certain Neanderthal gene variants make people more likely to become addicted to nicotine. Scientists speculate that these genes might have originally helped Neanderthals process natural plant toxins in their diet, but in the modern world of processed tobacco, they create vulnerability to punishment. The blood clotting story is perhaps the most dramatic example of how ancient advantages became modern problems. Neanderthals carried genes that made their blood clot more quickly than that of modern humans. In a world where injuries from hunting massive animals were common, fast clotting could save your life. A quick healing wound meant you could get back to hunting and survival activities faster. But in today's world, where people live longer and more sedentary lives, these same quick-clotting genes can be deadly. They increase the risk of dangerous blood clots that can cause strokes, heart attacks, and pulmonary embolisms. The very trait that once saved Neanderthal hunters is now killing their modern descendants in hospital beds. Recent studies have revealed even more connections. Neanderthal genes influence everything from skin thickness to pain sensitivity to the shape of our skulls. Some variants affect how we process certain foods, others influence our circadian rhythms. There are Neanderthal genes that make some people more susceptible to certain autoimmune diseases, and others that provide protection against different types of cancer. The COVID-19 pandemic provided a stark real-world example of how ancient DNA continues to shape modern health. Researchers discovered that certain Neanderthal gene variants significantly increased the risk of severe COVID-19, while other Neanderthal genes provided protection. The same genetic legacy that helped our ancestors survive Ice Age pathogens was determining who lived and died in modern hospitals. So, if you sneeze every spring, struggle with seasonal depression, or find it hard to quit smoking, you might just be experiencing the side effects of your 40,000-year-old relatives. Your body is still fighting battles that ended tens of thousands of years ago. But Neanderthals weren't the only ancient humans who left their mark on our genome. High in the mountains of Asia, another group was developing their own extraordinary survival adaptations, and their genetic gift would prove even more specific and powerful than anything the Neanderthals had to offer. Imagine standing on the roof of the world, 4,000 meters above sea level, where the air is so thin that every breath contains 40% less oxygen than what most humans need to survive. Your heart pounds violently, your head throbs, nausea overwhelms you. This is what happens to most people who venture onto the Tibetan plateau. Their bodies simply aren't designed for this hostile environment. But for Pemba, a 45-year-old Sherpa guide, this landscape is home. He moves effortlessly across terrain that would leave most people gasping and collapsed. He can carry heavy loads, work for hours, even sleep peacefully at altitudes that would send others to the hospital. What makes Pemba superhuman isn't training or willpower. It's a genetic gift from people who died out tens of thousands of years ago. Denisovans left a very specific gift, the EPAS1 gene. This isn't just any genetic variant, it's perhaps the most dramatic example of how ancient DNA continues to shape human survival in the modern world. Think about what the Tibetan Plateau represents. It's one of the most challenging environments humans have ever tried to colonize. The average elevation is over 4,500 meters. The air pressure is so low that commercial aircraft flying over it maintain pressurized cabins to keep passengers alive. Yet over 6 million people call this place home, and they've been thriving there for thousands of years. This tiny genetic tweak allows the blood of Tibetan highlanders to carry oxygen more efficiently in thin air, but calling it tiny is misleading. The effects are anything but small. When most people ascend to high altitudes, their bodies compensate by producing massive amounts of red blood cells. It's like turning up the volume on a radio to hear better, but instead of clearer sound, you get a thick, sluggish blood that can actually kill you. The EPAS1 mutation is found in 87% of Tibetans and just 9% of other populations, making it the strongest instance of natural selection documented in a human population. To put this in perspective, this level of genetic selectivity is almost unprecedented in human evolution. It's as if nature took a highlighter and marked this one gene as absolutely essential for survival in one specific environment. Here's how the science works. The EPS1 gene controls the production of a protein called HIF2A, which regulates how our bodies respond to low oxygen levels. In most people, when oxygen levels drop, this protein triggers a massive increase in red blood cell production, but the Denisovan version of EPAS1 prevents this overreaction. Instead of flooding the bloodstream with red blood cells, it fine-tunes the oxygen delivery system, maintaining just the right balance. The result is extraordinary, and Tibetans with this gene variant can live and work at altitudes that would be fatal to most humans, and they do it without the dangerous side effects that plague other high-altitude dwellers. Their blood doesn't become thick and sluggish. They don't develop the heart problems that often affect people living at high altitudes. They don't suffer from the chronic mountain sickness that can be fatal. Scientists confirmed that Tibetans inherited the entire gene from Denisovans in the past 40,000 years through interbreeding, the only plausible explanation for how a gene from ancient Siberian people ended up helping modern Tibetans survive at 4,000 meters above sea level. The genetic detective work that led to this discovery reads like a scientific thriller. When researchers first sequenced the genomes of Tibetan people, they found something that shouldn't have been possible. The EPAS1 gene in Tibetans was so different from the version found in other human populations that it looked like it came from a completely different species. Initially, scientists were baffled. How could a gene this different exist in modern humans? The answer came when they compared the Tibetan EPAS1 to genetic material from Denisovan fossils found in a Siberian cave. The match was almost perfect. The Tibetan version of EPAS1 was nearly identical to the Denisovan version, but completely different from the version found in Han Chinese people who split from Tibetans only 250 to 5,500 years ago. This discovery revolutionized our understanding of human adaptation. Using computer modeling, scientists determined that the only way this gene could have ended up in Tibetans was through ancient interbreeding between their ancestors and Denisovans. Somewhere between 30,000 and 40,000 years ago, probably in the lowlands of Asia, the ancestors of modern Tibetans had children with Denisovans who carried this extraordinary high-altitude adaptation. But here's the most remarkable part of the story. For thousands of years, this gene sat dormant in the Tibetan gene pool. It wasn't until their ancestors began permanently settling the high plateau that natural selection kicked in with devastating efficiency. People without the gene couldn't survive and reproduce at high altitudes. people with the gene thrived. Within just a few thousand years, the frequency of this gene went from near zero to 87% of the population. Without this ancient gift, climbing Mount Everest without supplemental oxygen would be nearly impossible. In fact, the handful of people who have successfully climbed Everest without oxygen tanks are likely carrying genetic variants that help them process oxygen more efficiently. The Denisovan EPAS1 gene represents the ultimate high-altitude adaptation, a biological solution to one of the most extreme environments on Earth. The implications extend far beyond mountaineering. Modern medicine is intensely interested in the EPAS1 gene because it offers insights into treating altitude sickness, certain types of anemia, and even some forms of heart disease. Understanding how this ancient gene works could lead to new treatments for conditions where oxygen delivery is compromised. Recent studies have revealed that the Denisovan high-altitude adaptation isn't limited to Tibet. Researchers have found similar gene variants in populations across the Andes Mountains in South America, suggesting that high-altitude adaptations evolved independently multiple times in human history. But the Tibetan case remains unique because of its clear connection to ancient interbreeding. The story of EPAS1 also highlights how quickly human evolution can work when the pressure is intense enough. In evolutionary terms, a few thousand years is essentially overnight. Yet, in that brief span, natural selection transformed an entire population, giving them superhuman abilities that persist to this day. Today, as climate change and population growth push humans into increasingly challenging environments, the EPAS1 story offers hope. It demonstrates that our species carries within its genome solutions to environmental challenges that we haven't even encountered yet. The genetic diversity we inherited from our extinct relatives may be the key to surviving whatever challenges the future holds. But the Denisovans had more gifts to give us than just high-altitude survival. Hidden away in Chinese museums and caves, scientists were about to make a discovery that would finally put a face to these mysterious people, and that discovery would come from the most unlikely source imaginable. For 15 years, Denisovans existed as ghosts in our genetic code. We knew they had lived. We knew they had shaped human evolution. We could trace their DNA in modern populations across Asia and Oceania, but we had never seen their face. Imagine trying to understand your family history when all you have are fragments. A finger bone here, a tooth there, scraps of DNA extracted from cave sediments. That was the Denisovan puzzle. Scientists had revolutionized our understanding of human evolution based on genetic material from fossils that could literally fit in your palm. But the most fundamental question remained unanswered. What did these people actually look like? For years, Denisovans were a mystery. We had their DNA, but not their face. This wasn't just scientific curiosity. It was a profound gap in the human story. How can you truly understand a people when you can't look them in the eyes? The answer came from the most unlikely source imaginable, a Chinese family harboring an 85-year-old secret. The story begins in 1933, during the brutal Japanese occupation of northeastern China. A Chinese laborer was working on bridge construction over the Songhua River in Harbin when he made an extraordinary discovery buried in the riverbank. And the skull was massive, unlike anything he had ever seen. Recognizing its importance and fearing what the Japanese occupiers might do with such a discovery, he made a desperate decision. He wrapped the ancient cranium and hid it in an abandoned well. For 85 years, the secret passed through generations. The laborer took the knowledge to his grave, but not before sharing it with his family. In 2018, his grandson finally retrieved the skull and brought it to scientists at Hebei Geo University. What they uncovered defied expectations. This wasn't just another fossil fragment. It was a nearly complete ancient skull that would rewrite our understanding of human diversity in Ice Age Asia. Then, in 2018, a family in China revealed an extraordinary secret, a nearly complete ancient skull hidden in a well for 85 years since the Japanese occupation. The skull was enormous, measuring over 23 centimeters in length, making it the longest human skull ever discovered. Its features were both familiar and alien, clearly human, but with characteristics that didn't match any known species. The skull's discoverers initially thought they had found evidence of a completely new human species. They named it Homo longi, or Dragon Man, after the Longjiang Dragon River region where it was found. The fossil made international headlines, but its true identity remained hotly debated. The breakthrough came when paleogeneticist Qiumei Fu at the Chinese Academy of Sciences requested permission to extract genetic material from the skull. This was no simple task. After 146,000 years, DNA degrades to the point where recovery seems impossible. Traditional extraction methods from bone and tooth enamel had failed repeatedly. But Fu had a different idea. Instead of looking for genetic material in the bones themselves, she focused on something most researchers had overlooked: dental calculus, the hardened plaque on the ancient teeth. Think about what dental plaque represents. It's a biological time capsule, preserving not just bacteria from the person's mouth, but fragments of their DNA, proteins from their food, even microscopic evidence of their environment. In modern dentistry, we remove plaque because it's unsightly and unhealthy, but in paleogenetics, it's pure gold. The extraction process was painstaking. From the dragonman's teeth, Fu's team managed to scrape together just 0.3 milligrams of calculus, barely visible to the naked eye. Nearly 4/5 of the genetic material they extracted was modern contamination from the many people who had handled the skull over the decades. But buried within that contamination were fragments of ancient DNA that would change everything. In 2025, scientists finally extracted DNA from dental plaque on the teeth, confirming this massive skull belongs to a Denisovan. The mitochondrial DNA sequences matched perfectly with known Denisovan genomes from Siberian caves thousands of miles away. But this wasn't just confirmation of identity, it was a revelation about Denisovan geographic range and diversity. At 146,000 years old, it's the most complete Denisovan fossil ever found. The dragonman skull revealed details about Denisovan anatomy that had been pure speculation before. The skull was not just large, it was architecturally different from both modern humans and Neanderthals in ways that spoke to a uniquely adapted lineage. The cranium showed evidence of a brain volume of approximately 1/420 cubic centimeters, within the range of modern humans and Neanderthals, but housed in a dramatically different skull shape. The face was broad and flat, with massive brow ridges that would have given the dragonman a distinctly imposing appearance. The nasal opening was enormous, suggesting a large nose that may have been an adaptation to cold, dry climates. But the most remarkable feature was the teeth. The preserved molar was gigantic, 13.6 by 16.6 millimeters compared to an average modern human molar of 10.2 by 11.8 millimeters. This wasn't just a big tooth. It was evidence of a robust jaw and powerful chewing apparatus that spoke to a different way of processing food and surviving in harsh environments. Working with National Geographic, paleoartist John Gurch created the first ever reconstruction of a Denisovan face, revealing wide cheekbones, prominent brow ridges, and a broad nose adapted for harsh climates. Gurch's process was part science, part art. He studied the skull's bone structure to understand how muscles would have attached, how the soft tissues would have been arranged, how the features would have appeared in life. The result was startling. The dragonman's face combined primitive features like heavy brow ridges with more modern characteristics like relatively flat cheekbones. The reconstruction showed a face that was unmistakably human, yet distinctly different from any modern population. It was the face of a people adapted to environments and challenges that no longer exist. For the first time in history, we can look directly into the eyes of a species that shaped our DNA. Those reconstructed eyes, set in deep sockets beneath heavy brows, have seen Ice Age landscapes that exist now only in our imagination. They represent a direct link to our shared human heritage, a reminder that our family tree includes branches we're only now beginning to understand. The dragonman discovery also revealed something profound about Denisovan distribution. Previously, Denisovan fossils had been found only in Siberian caves and the Tibetan plateau. The Harbin skull proved that Denisovans had spread across a vast geographic range, from the frozen reaches of Siberia to the temperate regions of northeast China. This expanded range suggested a people far more adaptable and successful than previously imagined. But perhaps most importantly, the dragonman skull provided a template for identifying other Denisovan fossils. With a complete skull to compare against, researchers could now re-examine museum collections and recent discoveries with new eyes. Fragmentary fossils that had been difficult to classify could now be compared against the dragonman standard. The implications extended beyond just Denisovan research. The skull's discovery highlighted how much of the human fossil record remains hidden, stored in wells, buried in museums, or still waiting to be discovered. It showed that major breakthroughs in understanding human evolution can come from the most unexpected sources, including the family secrets of Chinese bridge builders. Yet even as the Dragon Man skull answered fundamental questions about Denisovan appearance, it raised new mysteries about human diversity and adaptation. If Denisovans looked this different from modern humans while still being closely related enough to interbreed, what other forms of humanity might have existed in the prehistoric world? The answer to that question would come from an even more remarkable discovery, one that would reveal not just how different these ancient peoples looked, but how their unique biology continued to influence human survival in ways that scientists were only beginning to understand. We've explored how Neanderthal and Denisovan DNA shaped our biology, but there's another side to this story that's equally fascinating. Not all prehistoric DNA came from other species. Some of it is uniquely ours, and these uniquely human genes may explain the most profound mystery in human evolution: how our species, starting from a small population in Africa, managed to conquer the entire planet. Meet Dr. Elena Rodriguez, a behavioral geneticist at Stanford University, as she watches something extraordinary unfold in her laboratory. In one cage, ordinary laboratory mice go about their routine, eating, sleeping, following predictable patterns. But in another cage, something different is happening. These mice, genetically modified to carry a human gene variant, are displaying behaviors that seem almost human. They're exploring every corner of their environment with intense curiosity. When presented with a complex maze, they don't just find the food, they map out multiple routes, investigate dead ends, and seem to be exploring for the pure joy of discovery. When researchers introduce new objects into their environment, these mice investigate them extensively, while their unmodified cousins largely ignore the novelty. What makes these mice different is the presence of a single human gene, ADSL. The ADSL gene, found only in Homo sapiens, may have boosted our ability to explore, adapt, and outcompete other human groups. This isn't just speculation, it's the result of groundbreaking research that's revealing how genetics shaped human behavior in ways we never imagined. ADSL stands for adenylosuccinate lyase, and it codes for an enzyme involved in purine metabolism, a biochemical process that affects how our neurons function. But the technical name doesn't capture what this gene actually does. It appears to be one of the biological foundations of human curiosity and adaptability. Here's what makes the ADSL story so compelling. This gene exists in other primates, but the human version is unique. Somewhere in our evolutionary history, mutations occurred that changed how this enzyme functions in human brains. These changes appear to have enhanced our capacity for exploratory behavior, problem solving, and what researchers call neophilia, the love of new things. In experiments, mice with the human version of ADSL became more curious and resourceful in finding food. But the implications go far beyond laboratory rodents. When researchers studied human populations, they found striking patterns. People with certain variants of the ADSL gene showed enhanced performance on cognitive tests, measuring exploration, pattern recognition, and adaptive problem solving. This curiosity may have been the survival edge that helped our species spread across the globe. Think about what human expansion required: the willingness to leave familiar territories, explore unknown landscapes, adapt to new environments, and develop innovative solutions to survival challenges. These aren't just physical capabilities, they're fundamentally behavioral traits that require a particular kind of brain. Consider the magnitude of human expansion. Starting roughly 70,000 years ago, small groups of humans left Africa and within just 50,000 years had colonized every continent except Antarctica. They crossed treacherous ocean channels to reach Australia. They survived the frozen landscapes of Ice Age Europe. They navigated the dense jungles of Southeast Asia and the vast steppes of Central Asia. This wasn't just migration, it was the most successful colonization event in the history of life on Earth, and it required a very specific set of behavioral traits: extreme curiosity about what lay beyond the horizon, willingness to take enormous risks for uncertain rewards, and the cognitive flexibility to adapt to radically different environments. The ADSL gene may have been the biological foundation for these traits. While Neanderthals and Denisovans were highly successful in their specific environments, humans showed an almost compulsive need to explore and expand. We were the species that couldn't stay put, couldn't accept that the grass was fine where we were. We had to see if it was greener on the other side of the mountain. Recent neurological studies have revealed how the ADSL gene influences brain function. The enzyme it produces affects the metabolism of purines, which are crucial building blocks for neurotransmitters. Changes in purine metabolism can alter how neurons communicate, particularly in brain regions associated with reward-seeking, risk assessment, and exploratory behavior. Brain imaging studies of people with different ADSL variants show measurable differences in activity patterns in the prefrontal cortex and limbic system, the brain regions most associated with decision-making, curiosity, and the drive to explore. People with the more active variants show enhanced connectivity between these regions, suggesting a brain that's literally wired for exploration. But the ADSL story isn't just about individual behavior, it's about how genetic variations can shape entire cultures and civilizations. Populations with higher frequencies of exploratory ADSL variants were often the first to develop long-distance trade networks, maritime technologies, and complex social systems that could coordinate large-scale exploration and colonization efforts. Archaeological evidence supports this genetic story. The rapid spread of humans across the globe coincides with an explosion of technological innovation. Within a relatively short period, humans developed boats capable of ocean crossings, cold weather clothing and shelter systems, and hunting technologies adapted to dozens of different environments. This kind of rapid innovation requires exactly the kind of curiosity and adaptability that the ADSL gene appears to promote. The gene's influence extends beyond exploration to social behavior. Humans with active ADSL variants tend to be more willing to interact with strangers, more interested in learning about different cultures, and more capable of forming the kind of flexible social alliances that made large-scale cooperation possible. These traits would have been crucial for the kind of cultural exchange and knowledge sharing that accelerated human development. Modern studies have found ADSL influences not just exploration and curiosity, but also creativity, entrepreneurship, and what psychologists call openness to experience. People with certain ADSL variants are more likely to be artists, inventors, explorers, and entrepreneurs, the kinds of people who push the boundaries of what's possible. But like all powerful genetic tools, ADSL variations come with trade-offs. The same genetic variants that promote exploration and risk-taking can also lead to restlessness, difficulty with routine tasks, and what modern psychology recognizes as attention deficit traits. The gene that made us explorers may also make some of us unable to sit still in modern office environments. Recent research has also revealed that ADSL variants interact with environmental factors in complex ways. During times of resource scarcity or environmental change, populations with higher frequencies of exploratory ADSL variants tend to be more successful. But during stable periods, the same variants can be disadvantageous, leading to unnecessary risk-taking and resource waste. This suggests that human genetic diversity includes a built-in hedge against environmental uncertainty. We carry within our gene pool both the explorers who push into new territories and the settlers who make those territories productive. The balance between these tendencies may have been crucial for human success across diverse and changing environments. The ADSL story also highlights how human evolution involved not just physical adaptations, but psychological and behavioral ones. We didn't just evolve stronger bodies or better immune systems, we evolved brains that were compulsively curious about the world around us. This curiosity became our species' greatest survival tool. But humans weren't the only ones experimenting with different combinations of ancient DNA. Hidden in caves across Asia and Europe, scientists were discovering evidence of genetic experiments that nature had conducted long before any laboratory existed. And some of these experiments had produced combinations that seemed almost impossible, until the DNA evidence proved they were real. Deep in the Altai Mountains of Siberia, where winter temperatures plunge to -40 degrees and summer barely brings relief from the cold, lies Denisova Cave. For decades, this limestone cavern has yielded some of the most extraordinary discoveries in human evolution, but nothing prepared scientists for what they found in 2012, a single bone fragment, barely 2 centimeters long, that would rewrite our understanding of how different human species interacted in the prehistoric world. The fragment came from the tip of a finger bone, probably from a young person's pinky. It looked unremarkable, the kind of fossil that might sit unnoticed in a museum drawer. But when researchers extracted DNA from this tiny bone, they discovered something that shouldn't have been possible. In a cave in Siberia, scientists discovered something extraordinary. A bone fragment from a teenage girl. Her DNA told a story that read like science fiction, but the genetic evidence was undeniable. Her mother was Neanderthal, her father Denisovan. Let that sink in for a moment. This wasn't just interbreeding between closely related populations. This was a love story, or at least a story of intimate connection between two entirely different human species. Species that had diverged from each other over 390,000 years ago, yet had somehow found each other in the harsh landscape of Ice Age Asia. And DNA proved she was a first-generation hybrid, living proof that these groups didn't just meet by chance, they formed lasting bonds. The researchers nicknamed her Denny, and her very existence challenged everything scientists thought they knew about ancient human behavior and social structures. Think about what Denny's existence means. Her parents didn't just encounter each other in passing, they lived together, at least temporarily. They formed a relationship intimate enough to produce a child. They may have shared food, shelter, knowledge, and certainly genetic material that would influence human evolution for tens of thousands of years. Denny lived approximately 90,000 years ago, during a period when the climate was particularly harsh and survival was a daily struggle. Yet somehow, in this environment where every calorie mattered and every decision could mean life or death, two different human species found common ground. The technical analysis of Denny's genome reads like a genetic detective story. Scientists could trace her ancestry with stunning precision. Her mitochondrial DNA inherited from her mother was clearly Neanderthal. But when they analyzed her nuclear DNA, the genetic material inherited from both parents, they found an exact 50-50 split. Half Neanderthal, half Denisovan, with no evidence of any previous mixing in her ancestry. This meant her parents were pure representatives of their respective species. Her mother was a Neanderthal woman, probably part of a group that had migrated eastward from Europe. Her father was a Denisovan man, possibly part of a population that had been living in the Altai region for thousands of years. When they met, it was a first contact between species that had been separated for nearly 400,000 years. But Denny wasn't an anomaly. As researchers have continued studying ancient DNA from sites across Asia and Europe, they've found evidence that interbreeding between different human species was more common than anyone had imagined. Denny was just the most dramatic example, the clearest proof that these weren't occasional accidental encounters, but part of a broader pattern of contact and cooperation. Her existence reminds us that love, curiosity, or perhaps simple survival often cross the boundaries of species. In the modern world, we're used to thinking of species as separate, distinct categories. But the reality of prehistoric human interaction was far more fluid and complex. Consider the practical implications of Denny's parents' relationship. They would have needed to communicate despite potentially different languages. They would have needed to bridge cultural gaps that might have been vast. They would have needed to overcome instinctive wariness of others that evolution had probably built into their psychology. Yet they did it, and in doing so, they created something unprecedented, a child who carried the genetic advantages of two highly adapted human lineages. Denny inherited Neanderthal genes that had been fine-tuned for European environments and Denisovan genes that had been optimized for Asian conditions. She was, in a very real sense, a biological hybrid designed for survival in a changing world. Recent analysis of Denny's genome has revealed even more remarkable details. She carried genetic variants that provided enhanced cold tolerance, improved immune function, and neurological adaptations that may have enhanced her cognitive abilities. She was literally the product of hundreds of thousands of years of parallel evolution combined in a single individual. But Denny's story is also poignant because it highlights the precarious nature of these ancient human lineages. Despite their obvious biological compatibility, despite their ability to form relationships and produce healthy offspring, both Neanderthals and Denisovans would eventually disappear as distinct populations. Only their genes, carried in hybrids like Denny and passed down through thousands of generations, would survive to the present day. Archaeological evidence from Denisova Cave suggests that different human groups may have used the site repeatedly over tens of thousands of years. Stone tools, bone artifacts, and other cultural materials show evidence of sophisticated technologies that don't clearly belong to any single human species. This suggests periods of cultural exchange and technological innovation that may have resulted from contact between different groups. Denny's discovery has also changed how scientists think about ancient human social structures. The fact that her parents were able to form a relationship stable enough to produce a child suggests that these ancient humans were capable of much more complex social behaviors than previously imagined. They could overcome prejudice, communicate across cultural barriers, and form lasting bonds with individuals who were genetically and probably culturally very different from themselves. The implications extend to our understanding of how human diversity developed. Denny represents proof that genetic diversity in human populations was actively maintained through interbreeding rather than just geographic isolation. This mixing may have been one of the key factors that allowed human populations to adapt so successfully to diverse environments across the globe. Modern genetic analysis has revealed that hybrids like Denny weren't evolutionary dead ends. They were successful enough to reproduce and pass on their mixed heritage to subsequent generations. DNA from present-day humans shows clear evidence of this ancient mixing, particularly in populations from Asia and Oceania. Denny's story also highlights the role that individual choices played in human evolution. Her parents' decision to form a relationship wasn't just a personal matter, it was an evolutionary event that contributed to the genetic makeup of millions of modern humans. Love, attraction, or simple compatibility between two individuals from different species helped shape the trajectory of human development. Recent discoveries have revealed that Denny wasn't unique. Researchers have found evidence of other hybrids in the fossil record, and genetic analysis suggests that interbreeding between different human species may have been relatively common during certain periods. This paints a picture of Ice Age Eurasia as a place where different human groups regularly encountered each other and sometimes formed lasting relationships. But Denny's legacy extends beyond genetics. Her existence proves that the boundaries between different human groups were far more permeable than scientists had previously believed. In a world where different populations often view each other with suspicion or hostility, Denny's story offers a different vision, one where diversity is seen as strength, where differences are bridged rather than emphasized, and where love and cooperation can transcend even the most fundamental biological boundaries. Yet even as Denny's story reveals the connections between ancient human groups, it also raises questions about how these connections shape the modern world. As her mixed heritage spread through human populations, how did it influence not just our biology, but our behavior, our cultures, and our understanding of what it means to be human? Imagine if you could take a genetic snapshot of every person on Earth and see their ancient heritage highlighted in different colors. Neanderthal DNA glowing blue, Denisovan DNA shining green, uniquely modern human sequences in gold. What you would see would be one of the most beautiful and complex maps ever created, a living testament to humanity's incredible journey across the planet. This isn't just imagination anymore. Scientists have actually created these genetic maps, and what they reveal is breathtaking. Today, nearly all non-African humans carry about 1 to 2% Neanderthal DNA. In Melanesia and parts of Southeast Asia, people carry up to 5% Denisovan DNA. These numbers may seem small, but they influence immunity, adaptation, and even how our bodies process food. But let's start with what these percentages actually mean. When we say someone carries 2% Neanderthal DNA, we're not talking about 2% of their total genome being identical to Neanderthal sequences. We're talking about something far more subtle and fascinating. Scattered fragments of ancient DNA that have been preserved by natural selection because they provided survival advantages. Picture your genome as a massive library with 3 billion letters of genetic code. Now imagine that roughly 60 million of those letters, about 2%, are ancient text copied from books that were written by extinct relatives, and added to your library because they contained information that helped your ancestors survive. Every one of us is, in a sense, a living museum of ancient human history, but we're not passive museums. We're active participants in an ongoing evolutionary story where ancient adaptations continue to influence modern lives in ways both beneficial and harmful. Let's take a journey around the world and see how this ancient DNA is distributed across human populations. Start in sub-Saharan Africa, where the story of modern humans began. Here, the genetic landscape looks dramatically different. People of purely African ancestry carry virtually no Neanderthal or Denisovan DNA. This isn't because they're less evolved or more pure. It's because their ancestors never left Africa during the critical period when interbreeding occurred. But even this picture is more complex than it first appears. Recent studies have found that some African populations do carry small amounts of ancient DNA, probably from back migration events where people with mixed ancestry returned to Africa and reintroduced these ancient sequences to African gene pools. Now move north to Europe and Western Asia. Here, the Neanderthal influence becomes unmistakable. Europeans carry an average of 1.8 to 2.4% Neanderthal DNA, with some individuals carrying as much as 4%. And this DNA isn't randomly distributed, it's concentrated in specific regions of the genome that affect immune function, skin pigmentation, hair texture, and cold tolerance. Walk through any European city and you're seeing the living examples of this ancient heritage. That person with exceptionally thick hair might be expressing Neanderthal genes. Someone with enhanced resistance to certain viral infections might have their Neanderthal ancestors to thank. The pale skin that helps Northern Europeans synthesize vitamin D in low-light conditions. That adaptation was perfected by Neanderthals over hundreds of thousands of years. Travel east to Asia and the genetic landscape becomes even more complex. East Asians carry slightly more Neanderthal DNA than Europeans, about 2.3 to 2.6% on average, but they also carry something Europeans lack: Denisovan DNA. The percentage is usually small, around 0.2%, but in some populations it reaches much higher levels. The real surprise comes when you reach Melanesia, the island stretching from New Guinea to Fiji. Here, people carry up to 5% Denisovan DNA, representing the highest concentration of ancient human DNA found anywhere in the world. This DNA didn't just survive, it thrived, providing crucial adaptations for life in tropical island environments. But the distribution patterns tell an even more fascinating story. The ancient DNA isn't evenly spread across chromosomes. Instead, it's clustered in deserts and oases. Some regions of the genome contain almost no ancient DNA, while others are rich with Neanderthal and Denisovan sequences. These patterns reveal the ongoing process of natural selection. Regions with low ancient DNA are often areas where mixing was harmful, places where ancient genes might have interfered with crucial modern human adaptations. But the regions rich in ancient DNA are treasure troves of beneficial adaptations that natural selection has carefully preserved. Recent studies have mapped these patterns with stunning precision. Scientists can now identify which specific genes came from which ancient populations when they entered modern human lineages and how they've spread across different populations over time. The immune system genes tell a particularly dramatic story. When modern humans left Africa, they encountered new diseases for which they had no immunity. But Neanderthals and Denisovans had been dealing with Eurasian pathogens for hundreds of thousands of years. Interbreeding gave modern humans instant access to immune system upgrades that would have taken millennia to evolve independently. Today, many of the genes that protect Europeans and Asians from infectious diseases are direct inheritances from ancient human relatives. During the COVID-19 pandemic, some of these ancient variants influenced who got severely ill and who recovered quickly, proving that genetic events from 50,000 years ago were still shaping survival in the 21st century. The metabolic genes tell another story. Ancient DNA influences how different populations process foods, store fat, and regulate blood sugar. Some Neanderthal genes that were advantageous during Ice Age famines now contribute to modern diabetes and obesity. Denisovan genes that helped process certain plant toxins now affect how some people respond to modern medications. But perhaps the most intriguing discoveries involve behavioral and cognitive genes. Ancient DNA influences everything from pain sensitivity to circadian rhythms to cognitive processing styles. Some researchers suspect that ancient genes may contribute to population differences in creativity, risk-taking, and social behavior, though this research remains highly controversial and preliminary. The mapping project has also revealed unexpected connections between distant populations. Australian Aborigines and New Guineans share specific Denisovan gene variants with Tibetans, despite being separated by thousands of miles. This suggests ancient migration routes and population connections that archaeologists are still trying to understand. Modern technology is making these genetic maps increasingly detailed. Consumer genetic testing companies can now tell individuals exactly which regions of their genome carry ancient DNA and even predict some of the functional consequences. You can literally see which parts of your body are operating using software written by extinct human species. But these maps also raise profound questions about human identity and diversity. If we all carry ancient DNA from multiple human lineages, what does it mean to be purely modern human? How do we understand race and ethnicity when our genomes are mosaics of ancient adaptations from different sources? The answer may be that these maps actually celebrate human unity rather than division. They show that our species' greatest strength has always been our ability to adapt and incorporate beneficial traits from whatever sources were available. We're all hybrids, all carrying the genetic wisdom of multiple human lineages. Recent studies have also begun mapping ancient DNA in real time, tracking how these sequences are spreading or declining in modern populations. Some ancient variants are becoming more common due to modern environmental pressures, while others are being selected against in contemporary contexts. The implications extend far beyond academic interest. Understanding ancient DNA distribution is crucial for personalized medicine, as genetic variants that were advantageous in ancestral environments may create health risks in modern contexts. It's also important for understanding population health disparities and developing targeted treatments for different genetic backgrounds. As we continue mapping the ancient DNA within modern humans, we're not just learning about the past, we're gaining insights that could shape the future. And these maps are revealing the genetic tools our species carries for adapting to new challenges, from climate change to emerging diseases to space exploration. But the story of ancient DNA isn't just about where these genes came from or how they're distributed today. It's about understanding how they continue to shape human experience in ways both subtle and profound. And that story is still being written in laboratories around the world, where scientists are discovering that our ancient heritage influences aspects of human life that we never imagined possible. As we reach the end of this incredible journey through time, take a moment to consider what you've just learned. Right now, as you sit watching this video, ancient genes are working inside your body. Neanderthal DNA might be helping your immune system fight off a cold. Denisovan genes could be optimizing how your blood carries oxygen. Uniquely human sequences might be driving your curiosity to learn more about the world around you. Whether you carry more Neanderthal, more Denisovan, or just a trace, your DNA is a storybook, a record of encounters, challenges, and unlikely partnerships spanning tens of thousands of years. Think about the remarkable chain of events that brought you here. Somewhere in your ancestry, a modern human woman from Africa met a Neanderthal man in the forests of Europe, and their children survived the harsh Ice Age winters. A Denisovan mother in the mountains of Asia passed down genes that would eventually help her descendants thrive at high altitudes. A curious human ancestor carried a genetic variant that drove them to explore beyond the horizon, ultimately leading to the global spread of our species. Every love story, every act of courage, every moment of curiosity in your ancient lineage contributed to who you are today. You are the living product of countless prehistoric encounters between different human groups who chose cooperation over conflict, love over fear, exploration over safety. Our ancestors may be gone, but their legacy lives on in every heartbeat, every breath, every curious thought you have today. When you feel the urge to explore a new place, that might be your ancient human DNA expressing itself. When your immune system successfully fights off an infection, you might have Neanderthal genes to thank. When you adapt quickly to a new environment, you could be benefiting from genetic wisdom that was accumulated over hundreds of thousands of years. But this story isn't just about the past. It's about the present and future. The same genetic diversity that helped our ancestors survive ice ages and colonize new continents is now helping us adapt to modern challenges. The ancient DNA within us may hold keys to treating diseases, understanding human behavior, and even preparing for future environmental changes. The COVID-19 pandemic showed us how relevant this ancient heritage remains. The same Neanderthal genes that helped our ancestors survive prehistoric plagues influenced who lived and died in modern hospitals. Climate change is creating new environmental pressures that may favor certain ancient genetic variants over others. As we venture into space or face new disease outbreaks, the genetic tools we inherited from our extinct relatives may prove crucial for survival. The story of humanity didn't end with them. In fact, it's still being written. Every day, scientists are making new discoveries about how ancient DNA influences modern life. They're finding new fossils that expand our understanding of human diversity. They're developing new technologies that can extract genetic information from increasingly old and degraded samples. They're uncovering connections between ancient genes and modern traits that we never suspected. But perhaps, most importantly, this research is changing how we think about ourselves and each other. The genetic maps we've discussed today show that all of us, regardless of where we live or what we look like, are products of the same incredible mixing events that occurred tens of thousands of years ago. We all carry the legacy of multiple human lineages. We are all hybrids, all connected by shared ancient heritage. In a world that often emphasizes differences between people and populations, the story of ancient DNA reveals our fundamental unity. It shows that our species' greatest strength has always been our ability to adapt, to incorporate beneficial traits from whatever sources were available, and to thrive through cooperation rather than isolation. Your curiosity about this topic, yet the fact that you've watched this entire video, might itself be influenced by ancient genetic variants that drove your ancestors to explore and learn. The same restless intelligence that pushed early humans to venture beyond familiar territories is still driving human discovery today. As we continue to unravel the secrets hidden in our ancient DNA, we're not just learning about where we came from. We're gaining insights that could help determine where we're going. The genetic diversity we inherited from our prehistoric relatives may be our species' greatest asset as we face an uncertain future. So the next time you sneeze during allergy season, remember your Neanderthal heritage. When you hear about someone climbing Mount Everest, think about the Denisovan genes that might be making it possible. When you feel curious about something new, consider that your interest might be driven by uniquely human genetic variants that helped our species conquer the planet. You are not just a modern human. You are a living library of human evolutionary history, carrying within your cells the accumulated wisdom of multiple human lineages that learned to survive and thrive in the most challenging environments Earth could offer. The story continues with each of us every day as we face new challenges and adapt to new circumstances using the genetic tools our ancestors bequeathed to us. We are all walking testaments to the power of diversity, cooperation, and the incredible journey that brought humanity to where we are today. Thank you for joining me on this incredible journey through the hidden history written in our DNA. If you found this exploration as fascinating as I did, please hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell. There are so many more amazing stories about human evolution, genetics, and the surprising ways science continues to reshape our understanding of who we are. What aspect of your ancient heritage are you most curious about? Let me know in the comments below. Until next time, remember, you're not just watching history, you're living it.